Hey everyone, in this video we're going to finish off the Perseus story from Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles. So we have part 11 here, which is called the Oracle Fulfilled. So you might remember that when we first started the Perseus story, it involved this king Acrisius, right? And Acrisius had this oracle told to him that said he was going to be killed by Perseus. And so what he did is he took Perseus and his mother, Danae, and he threw them into the ocean thinking that it would kill them, right? That was the story about the ark. And that kind of set up the whole Perseus story. His hero's journey is trying to be killed by King Acrisius and it not happening, right? Remember, he gets saved. Jupiter intervenes. Zeus, if you're looking at the Greek version, intervenes and saves Perseus. And now here we are all these years later, and Perseus is going to fulfill the oracle, which means he actually is going to kill King Acrisius, which is something that we would know, or at least you might say a Greek or Roman listener would know hearing this story, because it's getting at the idea of fate and destiny, and this idea that, you know, in these cultures you can't outrun your fate. So whenever you look at oracles, particularly in ancient Greek, when you get an oracle, like, it's going to happen. It might not happen the way that you think it will, but it will happen, and that's the whole point of the oracle. And you see this in all the stories involving oracles. Oedipus Rex is kind of one of the more famous ones. It doesn't matter where you go or what you do, you can't outrun your fate. And that's what we're about to see in part 11 here with Perseus, right? He's going to fulfill his fate, and he is going to actually kill King Acrisius. So let's dive right into the story. We start with Posthike Perseus cum uxore sua ad urbem Acrisi redit. So remember, this is talking about how Perseus, remember, he had married Andromeda, and they'd been living in Ethiopia and having a really good life. And then he felt that tug of going home, and he finds his mother, right? And he goes to, save her, basically. And Polydectes, right? He turns to stone. That's the background to all this. So when it says post-hike, meaning after this or after these things, that's what it's referring to, meaning after all that other stuff with Polydectes and turning into stone. Perseus, and remember, hike, by the way, is that neuter substantive. So it literally means like these, but you could translate it as these things. So it's saying Perseus, cum uxore sua, with his wife, right? And it's ablative because you have cum there, right? With. And his uxore sua is talking about Andromeda, right? With his wife. What did they do? Or what did he do? He returned, rated it, right? He returned ad urbem Acrisi, to the city of Acrisius. Okay, so he's going back for this one last piece of unfinished business, which is, taking care of Acrisius. Okay, then you have ille, meaning Acrisius, he, right? It's referring to King Acrisius. Ille autem ubi Persium vidit magno terrore affectus est. So he, however, right, when he saw Perseus, right, Perseus is your accusative, so it's meaning when Acrisius saw Perseus, he was affected. There we have that phrase again, affectus est. So it's the fourth principal part, affectus, right? And notice how it's masculine singular because it's referring to Acrisius, right, ille in this sentence. So the fourth principal part, going with esse, you have the perfect tense passive voice, right? Because est is, the present tense form of esse. So it just means he was affected or impacted. Affected kind of makes sense here. And he was affected by great terror, right? He was overcome by this great terror because he recognizes who Perseus is. And now he has the moment where he realizes that Perseus isn't dead and he might actually come back and kill him because of that oracle, right? Then you have nam propter oraculum istud nepotem suum ad hoc timeba, right? So it's saying, why was he overcome with magno terrore, right? Because for you might say, timebat, he was fearing, right? He was afraid. And ad hoc here means still. So he was still fearing, or he was still afraid of nepotem suum, his nephew, right? Suum is just the possessive, right? His nephew, on account of, propter means because of or on account of, on account of oraculum istud, that oracle, right? And it's talking about that oracle that we started this story with way back in part 1, the oracle that says Perseus is going to kill you, right? So he still remembers the oracle. He's still afraid of it. So because of that, he's afraid of Perseus. Then you have in Thessalium igitur ad urbem Larissam statim refugit, frustratamen, neque enim fatum suum vitale. So what does Acrisius do? Right? So you go to refugit, he flees, or he runs away again, you might say, but he flees away statim immediately. right? And igator means therefore. So you might say, therefore, he runs away, or he ran away immediately into Thessaly, right? And Thessaly on this picture, the map is highlighted in red, right? Sort of a little more northern Greece. But he runs away to Thessaly, to the city, the urbem Larissam, the city of Larissa, which is a very well-known city in Thessaly, right? So he runs away to Larissa in Thessaly. However, tamen frustra, in vain, meaning he ran away, but it really wasn't worth it. Why was this all in vain? Because, again, right, you can't outrun your fate. That's the whole point of this Perseus story with Acrisius. You can't get away from your fate, right? Which is what we have in the next line. This is for vitavit, neque vitavit, and he, did not. Vitavit, avoid. So vitavit is perfect tense. He avoided. Neque just means and not. So it's saying it was in vain, because he did not avoid fatum suum, his fate. Right? Because again, the oracle told him you are going to die by the hands of Perseus, right? So he tried to hide, but there's no hiding fate. There's no escaping fate. So this was all frustra, in vain. Then you have post paukos annos, rex Larissae, ludos magnos fecit. Right. So after a few years, post paukos annos, and again, we have the duration of time here, the accusative. So it's saying after a few years. So he actually hides out pretty well from Perseus, right? He avoids him and he thinks he's doing pretty well. Acrisius, that is, thinks he's doing well. So after a few years, the king, the rex Larissae, the king of Larissa, fecit ludos magnos. Fecit here means he made. It really kind of means like he put on. Right? What did he put on or host? Great games, ludos magnos. And it's talking about the competition, the races, right? Sort of like think of the Olympics is really what it's getting at. The competition is really it. So he put on great games, right? Then you have nuntios in omnes partes dimiserat et diem edixerat. So he demiserat, he had sent out, it's pluperfect because you have that third principal part, right? It's a version of mitere, to send. So you can translate demiserat as he had sent, right? What had he sent? Nuntios, messengers, in omnes partes, into all parts. And again, notice how it's accusative, so you want to translate it as into all parts. And it means all like regions, really, all parts of Greece, you might say. In all directions might be a good way to do it. He sent them all over the place, right? He sent out the messengers. And the idea is he's inviting all the athletes, anyone, to the competition, to the Ludos Magnus, right? So he had sent out messengers into all directions, all parts. And edixerat, he had, you might say he had appointed, right? Would kind of be a good way to do it. It literally is edico, which means to declare or proclaim, right? To say out or shout out is kind of one way to think of it. But it really means like he appointed the diem, the day. And it means he set the day of the competition of the Ludos Magnus, right? So he sent out messengers and he appointed the day of when this was going to happen. Then you have multi ex omnibus urbibus Graeciae ad ludos convenerant. So many, meaning many people, ex omnibus urbibus, from all cities, right? It's ablative here because you have the separation idea, from or out of, right? Ex. So from all cities of Greece, Graeciae is genitive. So from all cities of Greece, they convenerant, they came, right? It comes from convenio, which means to come together, is really what it means. So you could say they came together ad ludos, to the games, right? So it means the multi here kind of implies two things. It means there's a lot of athletes, right? But it really also means there's a lot of spectators, right? There's a lot of people watching. So they're not all competing in the games, but it's like, the Olympics today or any big sporting event today. A lot of people would show up to watch these games, right? That's the idea. So it definitely has elements here of Olympic games, people coming from all over Greece to come watch the competition, okay? Then you have ipse Perseus, inter alios certamen discorum init, right? So Perseus himself, ipse Perseus, right? So remember, the king of Larissa sent out, this invitation to come see the games, and Perseus shows up, right? This is kind of the twist of fate. It's years later. He doesn't know Acrisius is there, but he shows up to compete, right? That's the idea. So init here means he entered, right? So it's saying Perseus himself entered among the alios, right? Among the others, meaning the other other competitors, you might say. But he entered into the certamen discorum, the competition of the discus, right? Is what's going on here. Discorum is just genitive plural. So it's saying that Perseus showed up and he decided to throw the discus, right? He's hopping into the competition with everyone else. They probably don't know he's a demigod, but that's fine. He decided he's going to chuck the discus today, right? So again, we have no mention of Acrisius yet, and we're not entirely sure how this is all going to work out. Like, what is Acrisius' fate? How is Perseus going to kill him? It all comes back into this last section. So you have at dum discum conice, awum suum casu ocide. So you have but, right, at, while he threw, right, conice, or while he's throwing the discus, right? So conice comes from conicere, right, which just means to throw, right, to toss, whatever you do with the discus, to throw, I guess, right? So while he's throwing, while he threw the discus, right, casu, here's the ablative. It means by chance, right? By accident is kind of one way to translate it, right? It's this ablative of manner, you'd probably say. And it's a fourth declension noun, which is why you have the casu, that long U. So by chance, he occided, he hit, or you might even say he killed, rather, is probably a better way to do it. Occidere usually means to kill. So he killed awum suum, his grandfather, right? How did he do this? Well, he threw the discus, right? That's the idea. So he tosses the discus. And remember, Perseus is like a demigod, right? So he's pretty strong. So he threw the discus, and you have here Acrisius enim inter spectatores eius certaminis forte stabat. So Acrisius, right? Forte, by chance, right? Or by luck, however you want to translate that. Probably by chance makes the most sense. It's ablative. It's really working, describing why he was there, right? So by chance, he was standing, stabat, among inter spectatores, among the spectators, right? And it's among the spectators, eius certaminis, of this, you'd probably say, or of that, you might say, of that competition, right? Of that certaminis, of that competition. So it's just saying that by luck, Acrisius happened to go to the same games Perseus was at, and he happened to be standing in the crowd, and Perseus chucks a discus and happens to, clonk him in the head and kill him, right? So that's the whole twist of fate that happens in this Perseus story, and it's how the oracle gets fulfilled. Right? He dies because he happens to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. So again, this is a really good example of how these oracles work. Like I said before, usually you don't know how they're actually going to play out. Perseus has no idea that Acrisius is there, right? And Acrisius has no idea that Perseus is throwing the discus. And what are the odds that he just happens to chuck it into the crowd where Acrisius is standing and, smack him with it? So that's usually how these oracles work, right? We said this at the beginning of the video. No matter what you do, there's no way you can avoid your fate. If you are destined by the oracle to get, killed by Perseus, they're going to find a way to get you killed, right? And usually it's in a manner that you weren't expecting, right? So that's kind of what this story is. Acrisius would not have been expecting to get hit in the head with a discus from Perseus, but that's exactly what happened. Okay, so this ties the whole story together, right? And Perseus had a lot of adventures along the way. But remember, the main idea that we started the Perseus story with is Acrisius tries to kill him because he's afraid of this oracle that, Perseus will end up killing him, which is exactly what happens, right? And that explains the whole kind of story of how Perseus ended up where he did. And again, it ties everything together because no matter how many adventures or side quests Perseus goes on, at the end of the day, he has to come back and kill Acrisius, which is exactly what he does. So hopefully this was, pretty straightforward for you to translate and you didn't run into too many bumps along the road. If you do, feel free to put a comment and I'll help you however you need it. If there's anything that I can explain for you in terms of this grammar. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. The Perseus story in terms of Ritchie's Fabulae is not the hardest one. It's meant to be at a pretty good level. So, with maybe a year or two of Latin under your belt and a couple of grammatical ideas, you should be able to read it pretty well. But again, I would say with this whole the whole Perseus story, not just this part, but in general, you should always read this in Latin, read it aloud, try to get a sense of what's going on. If you have a background of the vocab, that's huge. So start with vocab, read through it, and then just try to understand it without directly translating it. You'll be so much better off if you're reading the Latin instead of just translating it. But either way, at the end of the day, after you've read it, and hopefully understood it, you do want to come back and make sure that your translation is pretty good. So hopefully you're hitting a point where you feel really comfortable with this story. And if not, go back and read it again, right? Reading it once or twice, 3 times, it's never a bad idea just to practice your Latin, okay? So good luck with it. Moving forward, we'll transition into a couple more stories from Ritchie's. Right, the next one is the Hercules story, so we'll kind of dive into that. But this is the end of the Perseus section. Hopefully, it went pretty well for you, and you're feeling confident about your Latin. Again, if you have any questions at all, just let me know. But otherwise, good luck.